I need you to hear something that might feel uncomfortable at first. But stay with me, because what I'm about to say goes against almost everything you've been told about yourself. Ready? You're not lacking motivation. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You just haven't activated the right kind of energy inside you yet. Pause there for a moment. Let that settle. All those days when you told yourself, I just don't have the drive. I can't stay consistent. Something's wrong with me. Weren't signs of weakness. They were symptoms of something completely different. A misalignment, a mismatch of frequency, a version of you trying to operate on the wrong wavelength. See, most people think they need to push harder, force themselves, discipline themselves into becoming someone better. But what if the real reason you feel stuck isn't because you're not doing enough, but because you're doing everything from the energy of a version of you that can't take you where you want to go? That's the paradox. You're not lacking drive. You're broadcasting on the wrong frequency. And when your energy and your direction don't match, your system shuts down. It feels like procrastination, like resistance, like exhaustion. But it's not laziness. It's a signal, a message from a deeper layer of you saying, this isn't the frequency you're meant to operate from. The truth is, motivation isn't something you force. It's something that ignites. It turns on, like a light you didn't realize was wired inside you. And once it's on, you don't have to drag yourself forward anymore. You move naturally, effortlessly, almost like something within you finally clicks into place. That is the paradox, and that's what we're about to explore, the moment when your inner energy doesn't need to be pushed, because it finally wakes up. The moment I call, the quantum spark. Let me take you a little deeper, Joe, because there's something most people never notice. A moment so subtle, so quiet, that it slips right past them. A moment I call the quantum spark. It's not dramatic. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or adrenaline. It doesn't burst through the doors of your life announcing, hey, your motivation is here. No, it's much more mysterious than that. It's a shift, a tiny one, almost invisible to the eye. But when it happens, your entire inner world changes direction. You've felt pieces of it before. Those rare moments when you suddenly feel awake, clear, certain, like something inside you quietly stood up and said, now, let's move. And what's fascinating is this: it doesn't come from setting bigger goals. It doesn't come from hyping yourself up. It doesn't come from hearing another motivational speech. It comes from a place way deeper than that. There is a hidden force inside you, a reservoir of energy that doesn't respond to pressure or fear or deadlines. It only responds when you touch a very specific layer of your own consciousness. A layer most people never access because they're too busy forcing themselves to be motivated. But here's the secret: before that spark ignites, before the energy wakes up, there is always a moment of alignment, a moment when who you are and who you're becoming briefly line up, like two frequencies overlapping for the very first time. That is the moment we're heading toward, and I'm going to show you what this spark really is, why it appears, and what triggers it. But not yet. Because to understand the quantum spark, you first need to see the thing that keeps most people from ever reaching it. A misunderstanding so deep it shapes the way we think about change. And that's where we're going next. To understand this spark, I want you to picture something with me. Imagine you're standing in a completely dark room, not a hint of light anywhere, just silence, and the weight of the shadows pressing in around you. For a moment, you can't see anything, not the walls, not the floor, not even your own hands. That's what being stuck feels like. A kind of inner darkness, a fog, a heaviness that makes every step unclear. But then, out of nowhere, a single point of light appears, just a tiny glow, barely there. Yet the moment it flickers on, the entire room changes. The darkness doesn't vanish, not yet, but your relationship to it does. That little spark, it gives direction, it gives dimension, it gives you a sense of where you are and where you could go. And as that light grows, slowly, steadily, the room begins to reveal itself. Shapes appear, outlines form. Suddenly, the space that once felt suffocating starts to feel navigable. That's what the quantum spark is. It's that first flicker of inner light inside a place where you thought nothing could change. Or picture it another way. A single match striking in the dark, one tiny flame touching the exact point where the fuel is ready to catch. Not because you forced it, not because you deserved it, but because the conditions finally aligned. And when that flame hits the right spot, the whole system wakes up. This is the essence of the quantum spark. The smallest shift in the right frequency can illuminate your entire inner world. And once that happens, everything you thought was impossible suddenly becomes reachable. But there's still something you need to see. Because before the spark ever ignites, there's a belief, a faulty one, that keeps millions of people trapped in the dark room forever. And to move forward, we have to break that belief wide open. That's where we're headed next. Now before we go any further, we need to break something. Not a habit, not a pattern, a belief. A belief so common, so deeply woven into the way we think about ourselves that most people never question it. The belief that says, if I want to change, I need more motivation. Let me be honest with you, that idea has kept more people stuck than any fear, any failure, any setback ever could. Because we've been taught that motivation is some kind of fuel, something you have to generate, push, force, manufacture. We've been told we need more discipline, more hustle, more pressure, more willpower. And when we can't produce those things on command, we stamp a label on ourselves. I'm lazy. I'm inconsistent. I don't have what it takes. But here's the truth, and I need you to hear this clearly. People don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because they're operating from the wrong frequency. When your internal frequency is low, when your emotional state is heavy, foggy, misaligned, no amount of discipline can override that. You can try to push yourself, but you'll feel like you're running underwater. You can try to force productivity, but every action feels like lifting 100 pounds. You can try to be motivated, but the energy just isn't there. Why? Because you're acting from a version of yourself that is not built for the life you're trying to create. That's the part no one tells you. Motivation doesn't fail. Identity does. Frequency does. You can't create high-level results from a low-level state. You can't build a new future from the vibration of your old self. And every time you've tried to fix yourself with more discipline, more pressure, more self-criticism, it wasn't that the effort was wrong. It was that the starting point was wrong. You were trying to climb a mountain with an internal compass pointed in the opposite direction. So let me say it plainly. Your struggle was never about effort. It was about alignment. It was about frequency. And once you see that, really see it, you stop blaming yourself for something you were never meant to brute force in the first place. Because the quantum spark doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to resonance. And to understand why, we have to look at what happens inside you on a deeper, more fundamental level. A level where physics and consciousness start to blur into the same language. That's where we go next. To really understand the quantum spark, we need to step into a different kind of logic. One that doesn't separate your mind from your energy, your emotions from your biology, or your identity from the field around you. I'm talking about the logic of the quantum world. Now don't worry. This isn't the kind of science that makes your head hurt. This is the kind of science that makes your life make sense. Let me show you. In the quantum model, your body and your consciousness aren't two separate things. They're part of the same vibrational field, constantly interacting, constantly exchanging information, constantly shifting and responding to the frequency you're broadcasting. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every belief you carry, they all produce a tiny vibration, small, subtle, but powerful. And when those vibrations collect, when they repeat, gather, and build, they create what physicists call a baseline frequency, a kind of emotional, energetic home setting you return to over and over again. And here's where it gets beautiful. When that baseline frequency rises high enough, something extraordinary happens. A threshold is reached, a tipping point, a moment when the energy you've been quietly building crosses an invisible line, and just like an electron suddenly jumping to a higher orbital, your entire inner system shifts. Not gradually, not slowly, instantly. That moment, that sudden leap, is the quantum spark. It's not willpower, it's not hype, it's not pushing yourself, it's a frequency event. A moment when the energy inside you finally matches the energy of the version of you you're trying to become. And when that match happens, the system ignites. This is why the spark feels so different from motivation. Motivation is effort-based. The spark is frequency-based. Motivation says, I have to make myself move. But the quantum spark says, I can't stay where I am anymore. It's an energetic jump, a resonance shift, a quantum-level ignition that changes the way you feel inside your own life. And once you experience it, you can't go back. But here's the question most people miss. If this ignition is real, and it is, what activates it? What actually triggers the spark? Because it's not your goals, it's not fear, it's not hitting rock bottom, it's not inspiration, it's not luck. The real trigger was something far more subtle and far more powerful. And that's exactly where we're heading next. Now let's step into a different dimension of this story. One that science doesn't dismiss and spirituality has been whispering about for thousands of years. Because long before we called it a frequency shift, or a baseline resonance, or a quantum ignition, spiritual traditions around the world already had a name for this moment. They called it the awakening spark, inner ignition, soul activation. Different words, different cultures, same phenomenon. And if you've ever felt a sudden clarity, a sense of truth, a moment where something inside you clicked into place without you forcing it, you've already experienced it, maybe only for a few seconds, maybe so quietly you didn't even recognize it, but your soul did. Because here's something most people don't realize. Your soul isn't silent. It's not passive. It's not waiting for you to achieve more or prove something or fix yourself. Your soul is constantly generating energy for you. Real energy, real movement, real direction. But it doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It doesn't push. It waits. It waits for you to meet it on the right level of awareness. It waits for the moment when your inner noise quiets down. When the old identity loosens its grip, when the fear softens, when the mind stops trying to control everything. And in that stillness, even if it lasts only a breath, the soul sends out a spark, a signal, a pulse, a gentle ignition that says, "Here, this is your path. This is where your energy wants to move." And when that signal reaches you, really reaches you, you feel something shift. Not emotionally, energetically. It's the moment where action feels natural, where clarity feels obvious, where possibility feels real, where you stop trying to survive and start remembering why you're here. That is the spiritual dimension of the quantum spark. Not a miracle. Not divine intervention, not luck, but the moment you finally step into alignment with the layer of yourself that has always known the way. And once you feel that spark, you begin to realize something profound. It wasn't the world holding you back. It wasn't your habits. It wasn't your past. It was the disconnect between the self you've been living as and the self you were meant to become. And now that you can feel the spark forming, there's a deeper question waiting for you, the question that pulls us straight into the heart of this entire journey. A question most people never dare to ask. And that's exactly where we're heading next. Now that we've stepped into the deeper layers of this, I want to ask you something. And I want you to sit with the question, not rush to answer it. Because the truth behind it isn't obvious, it isn't straightforward, and it isn't where most people think to look. Here it is. What actually creates the quantum spark? I'm not asking what inspires you. I'm not asking what motivates you. I'm not asking what pressures you, pushes you, or scares you into action. No, I'm asking, what triggers that moment when something deep inside you suddenly wakes up? Because we know what doesn't create it. It's not goals. Goals can be empty. Anyone can write them down. It's not rock bottom. Pain doesn't automatically turn into clarity. It's not inspiration. Inspiration fades. It's not self-discipline. You've tried that. We all have. And yet, the spark appears anyway. Sometimes when you least expect it. Sometimes when life is quiet. Sometimes when you're not even trying. Which raises the question, if it's not effort and it's not willpower and it's not circumstance, then what is it? What is the hidden mechanism that flips the switch inside you and changes everything? Why does one moment feel impossible and the next moment feel inevitable? Why do you wake up one day and suddenly see a direction that wasn't visible before? Why does the spark arrive exactly when it does? Never earlier, never later. Always at the precise second your inner world is ready. There is a reason, a very real one, a reason woven into the mechanics of energy, the structure of identity, and the architecture of consciousness. But to see it, to really understand what lights that fire, you have to go beyond the surface, beyond habits, beyond routines, beyond productivity, beyond psychology. You have to go to the root, the core, the place inside you where your frequency and your future self first make contact. That point of contact is the birthplace of the quantum spark, and in the next part, we're going straight into it, all right? This is the moment we've been building toward. the part most people never see, even though it's the very thing that decides whether your life shifts or stays exactly the same. So let me tell you the truth as clearly as I can. The quantum spark doesn't happen when you change your actions. It happens when you change your internal state. That's it. That's the key so many people miss. You don't unlock new motivation by forcing yourself to move harder, faster, longer. You unlock it the moment your emotional frequency changes. Because a shift in action can be faked, but a shift in state cannot. Think about it. There are days when doing the smallest task feels impossible, like you're dragging an entire world behind you. And then there are days when you feel lighter, clearer, more open. And suddenly the things you've been avoiding don't feel like a battle anymore. Same you, same task, different state. That is the spark. It's the precise moment your emotional baseline moves from helpless, curious, stuck, meaningful, fearful, aware. And you can feel it when it happens. It's subtle, but undeniable. It's that tiny shift where your shoulders relax, your breath deepens, your mind stops fighting itself, and something inside you whispers, "This is possible." That whisper, that soft, honest inner yes, is the beginning of everything. Because the quantum spark appears not when you try to become your future self, but when you align with them. And alignment isn't effort. It's resonance. It's when the energy of who you are right now finally matches the energy of the version of you you're meant to step into. When the frequencies match, the leap happens naturally, effortlessly. It feels like clarity, it feels like direction, it feels like a pull. As if your future self is gently reaching back, guiding you forward. And from that moment on, you don't have to push yourself anymore. You want to move, you need to move, the energy moves you. That is the core insight. The quantum spark is not created by pressure, it's not created by grinding or forcing. It is created the moment your internal state shifts into alignment with the version of you that already knows the way. And once you understand that, you're no longer searching for motivation, you're tuning your frequency. But here's the most important part, the part that turns this from an idea into something you can actually use. How do you create that shift? How do you change your state on purpose? How do you ignite the spark instead of waiting for it? That's exactly where we're going next. Now that you understand what actually creates the spark, let's talk about something even more important. How do you ignite it on purpose? Because the quantum spark isn't random, it isn't luck, it isn't something you sit around waiting for like good weather or inspiration. You can create the conditions for it, and you can do it in surprisingly small ways. Let me show you how. 1. Shift your micro state. Not your whole life, not your entire routine. Just the tiny state you're in for the next few seconds, your breath, your posture, your gaze. These seem simple, almost too simple. But they're not. Your physiology is the fastest doorway to a new frequency. Think of it like tuning a radio. A slight adjustment changes the entire signal. So you start small. 1 deeper breath, 1 inch straighter in your spine, 1 moment of looking forward instead of down. These micro shifts tell your nervous system we're not stuck, we're moving. And that small signal starts the frequency change. 2. Rewrite your intention in a new language, not the language of goals, not the language of pressure, the language of frequency. Instead of saying, "I need to get this done," or "I have to change my life," You shift to something like, I'm choosing to operate from a higher version of myself today. Or I'm tuning into the energy of clarity. Or even as simple as I'm stepping into my next frequency. You're not forcing action. You're setting the emotional tone that action naturally emerges from. 3. Identity microactivation. This one is powerful. For 5 seconds. Not 5 minutes. Not 5 hours. You step into the version of you who already knows how to move. You don't visualize their life. You embody their energy. Just for a moment, ask yourself, how would the higher version of me breathe? Sit, look, stand, decide? And then, you become that for a few seconds. That's all it takes. Because identity activation isn't about pretending, it's about matching frequency, and once you match it, even briefly, your current self begins to reorganize around that new energy. You feel it, you sense it, you shift. This is the real bridge, not discipline for its own sake, not motivation for a day, not forcing yourself out of guilt or pressure, but deliberately nudging your energy into alignment with who you're becoming. Because when the frequency shifts, even just a degree, everything else follows. Clarity, momentum, direction, desire, movement. This is how the quantum spark ignites, quietly, simply, from the inside out, and once ignition begins, something unexpected happens next. A moment so subtle most people overlook it. But it's one of the most powerful parts of this entire transformation. And that's exactly where we're heading next. There's something almost paradoxical about the moment the quantum spark actually ignites. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't crash into your life with fireworks or adrenaline. Instead, it arrives quietly, almost silently, like a whisper inside your chest that you didn't realize you'd been waiting to hear. And it usually happens in a moment that looks completely ordinary. Maybe you're sitting at your desk. Maybe you're standing in the kitchen. Maybe you're just walking across the room thinking about nothing in particular. Then suddenly, not with force, not with tension, but with a soft, unmistakable shift. Something inside you clicks, a tiny release, a subtle opening. A feeling that doesn't say, I have to do this, but instead says, I'm ready. It's strange because the outside world looks the same. The room hasn't changed. Your responsibilities haven't changed. Your circumstances haven't changed, but you have. Your energy reorganizes, your mind stops fighting itself, your body stops resisting movement, and your awareness feels clearer, lighter, more honest. It's like a small ember that suddenly recognizes there's oxygen again, and without trying, without forcing, without pushing, you feel yourself lean forward instead of pulling back. You feel yourself wanting to act instead of avoiding action. You feel movement where there used to be friction. This is the silent ignition, the moment where your inner world shifts direction without making a sound. Most people miss it because they're looking for fireworks. A big life-changing moment that announces itself dramatically. But the quantum spark doesn't need noise. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need proof. It simply turns on. And when it does, your actions begin to carry a different energy, an ease, a certainty, a quiet confidence that says, I'm no longer pushing myself, I'm being pulled. That's the ignition. Soft, silent, but unmistakable. And once it happens, you can't unfeel it. You know you've crossed a threshold. Something inside you is awakened, and you're not the same person who stood on the other side of it. But there's still one more shift, the emotional resonance that closes the loop and leaves a lasting imprint inside you. And that's exactly where we're heading next. There's a moment, right after the spark ignites, when something inside you feels different. Not louder, not stronger, not more intense, just aligned. It's like your whole inner world lets out a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding for years. And for the first time in a long time, you're not wrestling with yourself. You're not negotiating with your mind. You're not dragging your body through the weight of everything you should be doing. Instead, you feel a pull, a gentle, steady pull toward the direction you're meant to move in. Almost as if the version of you who already lives that future, the clearer you, the braver you, the more grounded, more awake, more aligned you, is reaching back through the timeline and saying, "Come on, this way." And you can feel it, not in your thoughts, not in your plans, but in your resonance. The frequency inside you starts humming differently, cleaner, sharper, more precise. Action feels natural. Direction feels obvious. Momentum feels inevitable. You're not chasing a goal anymore. You're not running after a dream hoping you're good enough to reach it. No. Now the goal pulls you. The dream pulls you. Your future pulls you. Because once the quantum spark is activated, you're no longer moving with effort. You're moving with alignment. There's a sense of peace in it, not the kind that makes you passive, but the kind that makes you certain. You know something has shifted. You know something has awakened. You know a doorway inside you just opened, and you stepped through it. And even if no one else can see it, you can feel the truth of it vibrating quietly in your chest. Something in me has turned on. You may not know exactly where you're headed yet, but you know you're finally moving from the right energy, the right identity, the right frequency. The spark didn't just ignite your motivation, it changed your trajectory. And all that's left now is one final question, one that will determine whether this resonance lasts or fades back into the old patterns. A question that leads us directly into the next part of this journey. And that's exactly where we're going next. Now, before we close this chapter, I want to leave you with something. Because the quantum spark, as powerful as it is only the beginning. A spark can start a fire, yes, but it can also disappear if the environment around it pulls you back into the old frequency. And you know exactly what I mean. That feeling when you wake up clear, aligned, alive, only to lose the momentum a day later, or an hour later, sometimes even a minute later. The spark is real, but the world you're living in, your habits, your patterns, your emotional conditioning, your old identity, will try to drag you back to the frequency you used to live in. Not because you're failing, not because you're weak, but because your old frequency has gravity. And to keep the spark alive, you need something deeper, something more stable, something that doesn't fade every time you feel tired or overwhelmed or unsure. You need a mechanism, a structure, a way to hold your new frequency long enough for it to become your new baseline. A way to stabilize the energy you just awakened. And that's where this journey goes next, because if the quantum spark is the moment you ignite, then the next chapter's the art of staying lit. The process of holding your vibration so steadily, so intentionally, that your new identity no longer feels like a future version of you, but the only version of you that makes sense. This is the part almost everyone misses, the part no one teaches, the part that transforms a spark into a shift that lasts. It's called frequency stabilization. And once you understand it, you won't just awaken your energy. You'll learn how to live in it, walk in it, create from it, become it. That's where we're going next. Are you ready?